Welcome back, guys. In this next video I want to do a bit of a deep dive into longevity, we could call it, the space that's getting a bit of hype. And if you're aware of this space, you'll know the name Brian Johnson, the ex-businessman who spends over $2 million a year tracking hundreds of his biomarkers, and he's on a plan to reverse his biological age and live to be 150, the first person to do it supposedly.
Say what?
It's the most extreme public longevity experiment that is happening right now. But there's a huge question that gets raised from it. Is crushing your quality of life today worth the promise of a longer life tomorrow? We're going to look at some of the past headlines. We're going to break down some of what the science and research is actually showing as to what can actually support longevity. And ironically, it has very little to do with, this multi-million-dollar protocol. The real tension isn't about lifespan. It's more about healthspan. Living longer, in my opinion, is absolutely meaningless if you're not living well. And that's something we're going to try and cover in one of the topics of this chat. Now, when we look at what Brian Johnson follows, it is called the blueprint. And it's very rigorous, and there must be a shit ton of pressure on him that he must feel, because he's been so outlandishly open about what he's doing. Now, his protocol that we're going to be talking about is incredibly intense. We're talking like perfect macronutrient balance on an optimized vegan diet, which you can have your own opinion on.
I despise you for making me do this.
There's a massive daily supplement regime. There's extreme sleep tracking and workouts that have been specifically designed for supporting longevity biomarkers. He's measuring everything, and all the time he's doing this under an insane amount of pressure from the public. Because there's the thing, if it doesn't work right, if he puts all this money into it, and let's say he dies at a normal age of 70, 80 from a disease, an illness, random cause, this entire project becomes a punchline.
Carlos, your name?
No. Say it again. Say what you said.
Carl.
Now that's the risk you have to take for doing something outlandish like this. And all that money, all that time, and all those social experiences that he's missed, like meals out with friends, basic things. It could all be for nothing. And that's the trade-off that I kind of want people to think about, because there's a real big push for it at the minute. And the meticulous rigid routine versus spontaneous joy of everyday life is in the balance. And my take here is, each to their own. If you want to pursue that path and that's your choice, you're absolutely entitled to do so. And I think Brian should do it. But could a line be drawn in the pursuit of a longer life that becomes actively detrimental to the quality of life that you are living right now, and the constant pressure of and the stress of chasing what is probably he's deeming as perfection, the social isolation, the lack of flexibility? These things all have a cost, and this is the absolute extreme edge of biohacking. So what we want to do is we want to pull back from this ledge, and we want to look at what the robust and replicated science actually supports for the rest of us, or Gen Pop. Let's have a look. So a big thing here for me, like, we'll do these in what are called non-negotiable foundations, and we'll talk them in like pillars. So the first thing of these non-negotiable fundamentals that absolutely has to be in place is, they're all boring, they're not sexy, but they are absolutely essential. They are probably the absolute bedrock of longevity, if you want to call it that. And it does completely trump any of the fancy biohackings that are coming out. Number one, and I can't stress this enough, is going to be your sleep. It is the foundation everything else is built on. Poor sleep can, affect hormonal health. It crushes your cognitive function, impairs your ability to work out, train and focus. It's directly linked to a multitude of chronic disease and dysfunctions. And you can't biohack your way out of bad sleep. No amount of ice baths, no amount of infrared light treatment, no sauna session will fix the cellular damage caused by chronic sleep deprivation. And the more clients that I speak to, the more common this is. Sleep is a massive issue for people. Then the next thing we could say is resistance training. And this isn't just about looking good. It's not the aesthetics. It's about building and maintaining muscle mass, because it's one of the most absolutely useful things on your body you can do for your metabolic health as you age. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. It helps to regulate your blood sugar, it improves our insulin sensitivity, and not only this, it supports a strong metabolism. And it's essentially your armour against the age-related loss called sarcopenia, the loss of muscle that leads to, frailty, loss of independence as we age. And a surprisingly powerful biomarker tied to this is grip strength. And studies have consistently shown that grip strength is a remarkable predictor of overall vitality, future disability, and even cardiovascular health. It's just a simple measure of the body's resilience, so to call it. And then this is where we need to kind of diversify and see that this is where real danger lies in prioritising the trendy high intensity interventions over fundamentals. I see people all the time obsessed with their ice bath routines, but are running on 5 hours of sleep, 5 hours of broken sleep. They don't tend to lift weights. They're trying to biohack their way on health with more supplements. When they're trying to build on something like the foundation that's made of sand, they're optimizing the top floor, the icing of the cake of the building that's about to collapse. You have to master the basics first. Get your 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep in. Not only just quantity, quality matters more. Getting strong. Building that foundation that supports all the fancy things that you want to add to the top of it. Because without this, everything else is just noise. And I know that's going to sound controversial to people that may be big into the biohacking scene, but it's true. We've got so much research that supports the foundations. And then if we move into a next phase, which is like the cardiovascular engine of your health, it's the cardiovascular system that is needed and supported with sleep, with strength as a foundation, and then you're focusing on what's your heart and lung capacity, which are sort of like the pumps and the fuel source that keep everything running from the minute you wake to the minute you die. When it comes to predicting how well we live, there's one metric that can stand out above the rest, and that is VO2 max. This is basically the measure of your body's peak ability to utilize oxygen during intense exercise, and you'll see athletes do this test quite regularly. It's not just a number that athletes can follow, it's arguably one of the single best predictors of longevity we have. And we now know that a low VO2 max is a stronger predictor of mortality than traditional risk factors like high blood pressure or even smoking. That is genuinely how powerful and useful this is. And you're probably thinking, well, how do we improve that? Well, the most efficient way is through, your high intensity interval training. Sprinting is a good example. Short, all-out intense bursts of efforts followed by sequential rest periods. Now, this can be done on many things: outside running, exercise bike, on a treadmill, rowing machine, skiing. You get the idea. But even with bodyweight exercises like burpees, this kind of trains and pushes the cardiovascular system to its limits, forcing it to adapt to the threshold before delivering more efficient oxygen as we improve, essentially. It's like upgrading the engine in your car from a 4-cylinder to a V8. Now, this isn't to knock steady state cardio like a long jog, because that absolutely still has its place. It's not useless. It has its benefits for endurance, and it can support overall cardiovascular health. But with someone that is time crunched and wanting the biggest longevity bang for their buck, like high intensity interval training is an incredibly efficient way to do this with like interval based sprints, and you can get profound cardiovascular stimulus in as little as 15 to 20 minutes instead of being out on a run for over an hour. And the science behind this is the paramount, which is simple, is your heart is a muscle, and if you don't challenge it, you don't train it, you train it, you can't actively train it, isolate it, but you train it through the hard training, it can be weak. And a strong, efficient heart will pump more blood with each beat, which lowers your resting heart rate, reduces wear and tear on the entire body as a system, we could say. It improves your blood flow to your brain, improves it to your muscles, to the organs, and it also helps to control your blood pressure. It's just a fundamental pillar of having energy for your daily life. Now, how do you measure your VO2 max? You can measure it pretty accurately, sometimes with a smartwatch, because they are getting better nowadays, or even just, you can pay for a proper test on a treadmill which will assess it, which is going to be the gold standard of testing. And, if you know that for the likes of climbing stairs puts you out of breath, that it's something that you need to improve and work on ideally, because it kind of is an indicator that you're a bit out of shape, and gasping for air when it's with a very low effort, at a very low intensity, shows that your engine does need a tune-up. So prioritising this is going to be one of probably the best direct investments you can make in your future health. And again, I will stress that isn't meaning you need to do sprints every day of the week. There is always a Goldilocks principle, not too much, not too little. And one thing that we'll cover, especially on Brian's part, is the body-mind connection. And this is bringing us to a component that's often completely overlooked in the biohacking world, but I think it's just as crucial for physical health, and it's your mental state. Now, you can have the perfect diet, you can have the perfect workout routine, and you could have impeccable sleep. But if your mental health isn't in a very good place, the foundation is going to crumble at some point, because you're fighting a losing battle. Chronic stress is a real silent killer, and it's getting worse with the more modern age technology we're moving into. It comes to longevity, and it's not just a feeling, it has measurable consequences. Because when we are chronically stressed, your body's flooded with cortisol, and this is a hormone that over higher intensities and periods can accelerate cellular aging, shortening telomeres, which are the protective caps on our chromosomes, and it increases systemic inflammation. It will weaken our immune system, and it's a major contributor to heart disease, and it can also interfere with our gastrointestinal health, affecting tight junction proteins.
Chemicals, man. They'll fuck you up.
I always wonder what...
This is why no amount of fancy biohacking can fix a poor mental foundation. So you can't ice bath your way out of high stress, because that is a stressor in its own right. This is where two incredibly powerful but simple levers come in. Social connection is one, and a sense of purpose. These have been massive for me personally. Now, studies consistently show that strong social ties are important for longevity, as quitting smoking, feeling connected, having people you can rely on, that buffers you against stress and provides meaning. And similarly, if you have a purpose, something that really gets you up to get out of bed in the morning, a reason to get out, like whether it's to support your family, whether it's to work on your business, whether it's to improve your physical health, it's a profound predictor of lifespan. It gives you resilience, and it gives you something to actively go out and, carpe diem, seize the day. So the simple practices, what you can use for improving mental resilience, don't have to be complicated, First, practice some form of stress reduction. And a lot of people, when you ask them if they're stressed, they'll say yes. You ask them what they do to relieve it, and they don't know. So something simple that I like to do is you can use journaling, you can use meditation. Walk out in nature is one of my absolute favourites, away from screen time. You've got your deep breathing exercises like the Wim Hof method. There are others as well. And then actually you want to nurture relationships. So make times for your friends and family. And not only this, work on goal setting. So find a purpose in your day, whether it's, like I say, work on a skill, a hobby, or if it's work towards a personal goal or a business related goal. These are things that aren't measured in the physical sense or by biomarkers, but their impact on your long-term health is absolutely real. And ignoring your mental health while chasing physical perfection, which you could argue Brian's doing. However, his mental health could be in a very good position because he might be loving what he's doing. Who knows? But again, it's like trying to build a beautiful house on a foundation of sand, and it's really, really not a good way to work. Which brings us on to one of another pillars for longevity. It's diet. And when we talk about diet, this is where a lot of biohacking trends tend to get it backwards. Because you simply cannot out-supplement a poor diet. The idea that you can biohack or cheat your physiology and your way to eating healthier when you're actually eating like a child with supplements is complete fallacy. This brings us to another trend of intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting has its benefits, I'm not slating it, but there's some research that's often applied in an overly simplistic way. There was a major study with over 6,500 adults, and it found people that regularly skipped breakfast was linked to an 87% higher risk of death from cardiovascular disease. Now, that's a pretty staggering statistic, and what it kind of tells us is that timing of your meals, and especially skipping the first meal, can have consequences in the long run. The focus should be about nutrient density, packing your meals, with good quality protein, healthy fats, complex carbohydrates, not on this gimmicky meal skipping, because it could be doing more harm than good. And again, it becomes edgy because it's shown on social media, and all it takes is one person to say, this is what I do to stay in shape, and it becomes like a new religion, a gospel. So now that we've covered those pillars, I want to talk about the goal of Healthspan. And I think this is a real advisable goal that we all should be working on. and we really should be chasing is health span and not lifespan. Because we are living longer, but we're also taking longer to die. And that's a terrible equation. A long life spent in poor health, dependent on medications, support from external care or family having to look after you, is lacking vitality, and it's not a win. And health span is about compressing those years of decline. It's the quality of your years. It's the joy of being physically capable, mentally sharp and independent as we age. This is a much more inspiring and achievable target than trying to live to 150. It's about adding life to your years and not just years to your life, we could say. Now, if Brian's happy doing what he's doing, that's fantastic, but I'm just trying to give you an objective opinion here from the outside view, or a bird's eye view, we could say. So what action should you do with all this information if longevity is your main goal? Now, I want you just to focus on one foundational habit. Don't try to overhaul everything at once. Pick one, such as prioritising getting a good sleep routine, hitting a protein target in each meal, or simply focusing on hitting around 8,000 steps in a day. Measure something simple and make sure that you can do it consistently, because the goal is to build foundation of health span actions, and they are compounding, they build on each other. Don't get lost in obsessions and trying to do everything at once. The result that we want is more energy and vitality right now, and that's the whole point. Do something simple that you can do and start today, achieve it relatively easy, and that will give you the motivation to keep building and working towards your health span, so we could say. To summarise in this, when if you're aware of Brian and you've seen what he does in his day-to-day life, I'd advise checking out one of the videos that he's done, because he's shared a number of them. And to me, it looks quite miserable. In my opinion, it wouldn't be for me. Now, I love my health and fitness. I love the gym. I love eating well. I try and make my routine as enjoyable as possible. But would I want to be taking plasma from my son? Just, considering stool transplants.
Say what?
And restricting the foods I can eat because I'm eating purely for function and very little for taste. Is it worth it? Maybe not, but in Brian's eyes it could be. And again, this point comes down to, if it works out, then he's proven that it's possible. And if it does work out, he may outlive me, because I may pass before and not get to see if he does it. However, if that's not the case, and it turns out that all his effort was for nothing, then he's also proved the point that right now, this current moment in time, what we believe to be using from his data for chasing longevity maybe wasn't right and needs a complete going back to the drawing board. And if you are influenced by things you see on social media, such as biohacking with red light therapy, with ice baths, with the latest supplement that's coming out, hate to break it to you, but if you don't sleep right, you eat like a child, and you do very little movement, but you want to spend money on things that are fancy, that's like trying to bake a cake and getting all the icing and the toppings made, and the cake's not even been started. So yeah, choose health span over lifespan. Bosh.